My name's Andy Bishop, and I am a freelance podcast producer in San Diego. I've been focusing on it for about the last 18 months. Yeah, for the time being, working for myself as a freelance podcast producer, mostly focusing on an internal project, I would call it, where we're trying to build up our own sports podcast and brand. Ultimately, though, I am looking to do or produce more content for other folks and other companies and potentially create a business out of it one day. We've kind of realized that what we're good at is producing podcasts, both audio and visually. So that involves live streaming, whether it's to Twitter or YouTube or what have you. So probably the most realistic opportunities are going to be with close contacts in the sports realm, and again producing content for them, whether that is podcasts, whether that is branding them for social media, for websites, etc. And then yeah, ultimately, hopefully, some bigger companies. I do work part time producing podcasts. I have a full time job in hospitality, so I work out of the office that I'm in right now a couple days a week, and again, mostly focusing on our own podcast. So that involves writing articles for our website, planning out a live podcast that we do each week, clipping video for clips to put up on social media, on our website, cutting audio, and then just trying to engage people on social media. That's another challenge for us, as we're trying to create our own thing. We don't have a huge following. We aren't a huge name. I'm not a former athlete, or anything like that. So really trying to go grassroots and work and research and figure out the best ways to gain a following and increase engagement. That's a really good question. For me, I mean, I got my undergrad degree. I double majored in business and communication. I would say most people that do work in this industry probably have at least an undergraduate degree. That said, you don't necessarily have to. As we continue to to move into the digital space, so much of it is your education on the digital front. So some people may not necessarily need a degree for that. I will say if I were to go back to college again, I would definitely major in something like digital media marketing. I'm sure there's a lot of degrees like that in college these days. There really wasn't. I graduated in 2010, and I wish I just would have had a few more technical skills heading out into the workplace. I think my education has helped me in some ways, without a doubt. Again, the one thing I wish I would have focused on, and this is more just a personal thing. It's not that the education didn't give me opportunities for this, but to have a technical skill like working in graphic design or website creation or video editing, those are things I kind of had to pick up as I got into the real world. Or even in business, like I wish I would have maybe taken accounting a little bit more seriously, and that would have given me some more opportunities, in my earlier career. So again, that said, I would say the soft skills that I learned in college is what really, I think is going to benefit me going forward and already has in my career. So that includes strategy and leadership and risk taking and planning and a lot of different things in those areas. Because like what I'm trying to do with this podcast, like I can't do it alone, but I kind of am the visionary, and it's going to take a lot of people involved with it, a lot of community to make it happen. But I definitely think I kind of have those strong soft skills that I think will be good for me going forward. Well, I've always been a huge sports fan. I mean, when I was a kid, I was really good with statistics and remembering players and those things. And so when I was a kid, everybody said, oh, this guy's going to be a play by play broadcaster or something like that. In college, I actually started as a pre-med major, thought I was going to go down the medicine path. But as I started taking some classes in speech communication and public speaking, I realized I loved that. I kind of re-engaged my passion for sports and thought I wanted to do sports broadcasting, sports media in some form. So it's really the passion has always been there. And then figuring out a way to make it a viable career is a true challenge because everybody wants to work in sports. It is such a competitive area. So figuring out a way to make it happen and make some money from doing it, it's tough. I mean, first off, and this is the case pretty much with any industry, is you got to have a good work ethic. Um, there's just so many things that will try you in this industry. So you just kind of got to be consistent if you want to make it. And then honestly, like you can't be afraid to fail and you can't be afraid to try because like with this podcast that I'm doing, there's so much experimentation with it. And there's so many ways that you can build it up and you can try to get a following from it or have it get attention. And I'm not going to act like I'm a total expert on this. And especially in the digital landscape, so much of it is new to us and it's always changing and always evolving. You just have to try a lot of different things. And, at some point, one thing or two things are going to work, but a lot of things probably aren't going to work. And you just got to be okay with failure, but just keep your head up and keep going. Well, there's various levels that you can go with. You can spend thousands of dollars on audio equipment, video equipment, what have you. For us, we're doing things on a budget, so we're keeping it pretty simple. Thankfully, my colleague, his name's Brian, we co-produce and co-host the podcast together. We have a lot of experience with video and with audio. He's actually been a musician over the years, so he's really fine-tuned with the audio thing. I'll show you just one thing. Like this is the podcast microphone I use. It's $250. So it's kind of I would say middle of the road one that's pretty good. But like I said, you could spend $5,000 on a microphone if you really wanted to. But at the end of the day, as long as you can look and sound pretty solid, and what's going to matter is how good your content is. If you know what you're talking about, if you're visually appealing, as that becomes more and more important online, that's really what it's going to come down to. Say generally speaking, it involves multiple people, especially in our case, we're kind of an upstart type thing. If we aren't officially a company, we aren't an entity at this point. We're working towards that. But if I could pinpoint a couple of our core values, I would say it'd be like storytelling and community. So community is huge for us. In sports, I want to talk to athletes. I want to talk to broadcasters. I want to talk to people working in sports business, sports marketing. That's what we want to do. That said, if you do have a following, if you're a former athlete, if you're an investment or real estate expert, then you could maybe do it more solitary. But like I said, generally speaking, it involves a village. Given the year that we're in, it doesn't. We are mostly producing all our content from home or from the office and distributing that on our social and digital forums. Before COVID hit, we were going to be traveling a bit. It was kind of a bummer. For instance, right before COVID hit, it was the NCAA basketball tournament happening. So I'm here in San Diego, but our podcast, we'd gotten a media credential to cover the NCAA basketball tournament in Sacramento, California. San Diego State is the big school that we cover down here, and they had a really good basketball team. They were going to be playing up there, so I was going to have some pretty cool access to talk to players and coaches, produce some really cool content for our podcast. And then a week before that was set to happen, COVID hit and March Madness got canceled. So hopefully in time, as we're able to start traveling more and being in touch with people, that will definitely be a part of what we do. At the same time, we're pretty much focused on San Diego at this time, so it'll mostly be local San Diego content, but that's where we're starting. Then hopefully expanding from there. As the brand and opportunities increase, connecting with different people in the sports world, then travel will certainly be a part of it. I'll start with disadvantages. I'm a half glass full type of guy. So I I talked about it a little bit before, but the disadvantage is that so many people want to do it, and it's really really competitive. So that can be the frustrating thing sometimes. You think you produced a cool video or you did a really cool episode and you put it out on social media, and some other 15-second video from wherever gets more attention than you or whatever. There's just so much content out there, and navigating what's the best type of content for us to put out there, that's something that can be a challenge. So yeah, just the competitiveness of it. In terms of advantage, I just think it's something that we love doing, and we have an opportunity to have a job doing that. I've done so many cool things working in play-by-play broadcasting and video producing different sports contents and interviews with athletes. So just the satisfaction of doing something you love, doing something that you're passionate about. That's a cool deal. That's a great question. I feel like what I'm doing with the podcast producing is really a culmination of all the different jobs in sports media and production in the past. So I've done some really cool video producing for, like I did some production work for Fox Sports San Diego here, in America's finest city. At the same time, I was doing a really cool digital content role with Major League Baseball. That was back in 2015. That was probably one of my most favorite years, career wise. So with that, I was just learning how to edit and film a lot of video. I was learning how to get good photo and video content from around a Major League Baseball stadium, and getting that, sending that to Major League Baseball and seeing how they were putting that up on mostly like Twitter and Instagram. So that was a really cool year of experience, just learning a lot of good tools. I would say just like visual elements of what you have on the digital space. And then I've done some of the like the on-camera stuff, so play-by-play broadcasting for a lot of high school and college athletics here in San Diego. I did take one job out in Texas for a news reporting role, so that got me a lot of good on-camera experience, but also the back end. People think, oh, you're a news reporter, you're just the on-camera guy, but there's so much work that you do in investigating a story, or just producing it from the back end to where it looks good on camera. So I mean, so many roles where I've done things on camera, off camera, things in digital marketing. So that's kind of the culmination of all I've done is what's going on with this podcast. It certainly takes a lot. I've always considered myself an entrepreneur, and I would say going back as far as maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I always thought that I'd want to start my own company in some form or fashion. So that's what I'm doing with this podcast. Again, it's not a complete entity at this point, and we're still figuring out ways that we can create revenue streams. So that's a challenge for us. So I would just say it takes a lot of work, a lot of collaboration, a lot of creativity and ingenuity, and just coming up with new ideas. And like I said before, just trying stuff out and figuring out what works. So I've been doing that for the last 12 to 18 months. We literally started this podcast, two buddies and I, we were just like, let's meet at a sports bar and restaurant and let's just talk sports, do a live stream with it and see where it goes from there. So that's where it started. And then over the last, I would say, starting in 2020, this last year, we've gotten more serious about it and growing it. And again, just looking for different revenue streams. Ultimately, as we grow our audience, like that'll be advertisers and sponsors. A quicker way that we're looking to gain revenue is through merchandise. So we're like going through these t-shirt designs currently that we're going to launch probably before Christmas, and try to get some revenue that way. We're going to do like a photo shoot with it here in a couple weeks. So just trying out a lot of different stuff like that. And again, figuring out what works, but being strategic about it. You can't just kind of do it half-heartedly. Like you really have to go in on it, which is tough when you're working a normal 40-hour job, which is what I'm doing. So just putting in a lot of time when I can, and again, collaborating with people that you can lean on a bit. But ultimately, like if you're passionate about it and, the people you involve are passionate about it, some things are going to come to fruition. And that's what I'm confident about. So no, it's tough, but I think it takes a certain personality, somebody that's not afraid to take risks, and somebody that's creative, and just kind of a go-getter. So I guess that's what I am. Always trying to improve. And I think just you're always trying to learn. Like if you're totally set in your ways and you just have a certain plan of how things are going to go, yeah, you want strategy and you want, planning and forecasting, but at the end of the day, you got to be flexible and ready to take on what happens. There's probably a spectrum of it. So, I guess companies or athletes that employ podcast producers probably make decent money, but it's really just dependent on the following, I would say. If you're producing a podcast for Barstool Sports, then yeah, you're probably making really good money. If you're maybe just producing for a friend that's a former athlete that has 10,000 followers on Twitter, probably not a ton right off the bat, but it's the kind of thing that I think is continuing to be a growing industry. So there's always more opportunity for it. You just got to figure out how to make it happen. Like I said, it's competitive. I would say don't expect that to make a really good starting salary off the bat. I've just found, especially working in sports, it's going to be a lot of gig type stuff off the bat. So it's going to be a part-time thing, or that type of situation. So that's even what I'm doing right now. Is it's kind of my part-time gig, and hopefully in time it'll increase from there. I mean, I personally haven't, dealt with that a lot. I will say, people think podcasts, a lot of people just think audio only, or, they think podcast producer, you're just the guy with, the headphones on and all you're doing is doing stuff behind the scenes. For me and even my co-host, we kind of have that blend of both on camera and off camera production skills. So we're trying to kind of bridge the gap, I guess. We want to be more than just a producer, so to speak. And even our podcast, it's more than just, an audio recording that gets put up on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We're trying to expand it a bit, be relevant from a video and a visual perspective, trying to be relevant on social media, which is tough when you're in your mid 30s. 18-year-old kids are getting millions of views on TikTok or whatever. But no, I mean, it's, we're trying to expand it a bit, I guess. Yeah, so I think just overall it's fulfilling because it has incorporated a lot of things that I'm bringing together, or that I've done in my past, I guess. Um, Man, that's a good question. I feel like I have a lot to say, but I'm trying to figure out a coherent way to say it. I just think that I don't know. I've done so many different jobs. I've worked in so many different industries, and this is something that I'm really passionate about. And when we do get some engagement from an article or from a certain video or from one of our episodes, It just makes us feel really good because it's something we've been working towards in a lot of ways, I guess. And especially, like I said, when it's such a challenging industry and there's so much competition, just the fact that we're sticking it out, especially this year, like would have been so easy when COVID hit to just kind of give up on it and just like, oh no, we're gonna have to do the Zoom deal and we're gonna have to do all this stuff from home. That could have been an easy way to just give up on it, but just the fact that we've kept it going and are always planning to do more stuff. My buddy Brian that I do the podcast with, we're just always coming up with new ideas and we're on the same page in a lot of ways. So yeah, just having kind of a brotherhood and a community component to it is pretty fulfilling. I mean, it's easy to get frustrated in a lot of ways. Again, just realizing how competitive the digital space is and just how many eyeballs there are, which you'd think, oh, that's a benefit, but everybody's creating and putting out so much different kinds of content that it can be easy to get frustrated that way. And then just in general, anytime you do some kind of production or podcast, there can be a technical difficulty of sorts. Uh, so there's always that type of potential frustration from just like a audio and visual component. So I guess those are the biggest things that I think of frustration wise. But again, like you just gotta keep your head up as much as possible and um, just try to be above it. I don't know. I think I learned a lot of things on the fly. Um, I wish I again maybe would have gotten a few more technical skills like graphic design, um, and just yeah, some things in design and photography. Um, I don't know. I feel at the same time I was, left school in 2010 as things were continuing to move into the digital realm. Uh, so I think, at that point there wasn't curriculum on digital media marketing or how to be a social media marketer and plan a social media calendar or something like that. So it's kind of just been one of those industries that again continues to change and evolve. And I've tried to keep my head above water with it and keep learning and educating myself. So I don't know, not really anything that I wish I would have been told or anything like that. It's just kind of been one of those areas that's ever changing. Well, yeah, I mean, thankfully I live here in San Diego. It's a pretty awesome place. I work, like I said, at a hotel for my day job, 40 hours a week. Thankfully, I'm right by the beach there. So, like, I go surfing a couple days a week, which is pretty amazing. And then I work out of this office a couple days a week. It can be 5 days a week or 5 hours a week. It can be 20 hours a week. It's really just kind of content dependent and what my schedule, life, and other work schedules like, and what my buddies is. So it's just been one of those years where it's just try to put as much time into it as you can. I think once we continue to put more processes in place and know what our content is going to look like week to week a little bit more, then it'll probably be a more consistent 15 to 20 hours for the next several months. But ultimately, yeah, we want to create a company out of it, and I'm an entrepreneur, so in time, maybe a 60 to 70 hour a week deal, and I'm okay with that. Just got to figure out a way to get paid doing it. In sports, I think you absolutely have to have some kind of sports background. Just because in a digital content producer role, you're going to have to be writing articles. You're going to have to be updating things as a podcast is going. So you have to have some knowledge of sports. You certainly have to have some type of technical knowledge. But at the same time, I mean, there's the internet. So you can learn pretty much anything that's out there. It's just a matter of time and how committed you are to doing it. So I had some skills going into all of this, but at the same time, you know, over the last couple of years, I've just had to learn a lot more stuff. I think so much more is, you know, going to social media. So I think there's more roles in social media content, graphic design. Um, that's the biggest thing that comes to mind, just because I did a little bit of that a few years ago, and you know, everybody's on social media more and more. So I think there's definitely some roles in that area, and especially, you know, younger kids coming through school, like that's where the opportunity is going to be, is in that space, I think. So I think just in general, it's going to be a lot harder than what you envision, which is fine. You just have to be willing to put in a lot of work to be able to do something that you're passionate about. I mean, read anything from any entrepreneur, you know, they just didn't end up working their dream job from kind of doing a 40-hour job, yeah, 40-hour week job, you know, and just kind of working their way up, and, you know, or whatever. It's doing a lot of time, a lot of stuff on your spare time. And like I said, just dealing with failure, and getting back up on your feet. So yeah, I mean, just you got to try a lot of different stuff, and plan it out as much as you can. But at the same time, you know, you maybe choose a major and you think you're going to go down a path, and it ends up not being what you want to do. So I think just always being flexible and on the lookout.